Morning, everybody. What do you know about President Polk? For many Americans, one of our more unknown presidents. It was on this date, May 11, in 1846, that he asked Congress to declare war on Mexico, which it did 2 days later on May 13. And the war with Mexico added more territory to the United States than any other event, including the Louisiana Purchase. This map reminds us that the area of modern Texas was Spanish until 1821, when Mexico became independent and it became part of Mexico. Now, another part of our story is the people who grew cotton were looking to expand because cotton tends to wear out the soil. And the area of East Texas is a pretty good place for growing cotton. So cotton growers had their eye on that territory. In 1844, James Polk became president as a Democrat. And one of the goals of the Democratic Party was to expand the nation. The country was really strong economically. Now you'll note from this map that native peoples lived in what's now Texas and New Mexico. And because the area was sparsely populated, Mexico had trouble governing it. And in this map of Mexico from that time period, you can see the state of Tejas, which is Texas today. So soon after independence, the Mexicans allowed Stephen Austin, pictured here, to move into their state of Tejas with 300 families, partly to be a balance against the native peoples that were there. But it wasn't long after that that the Americans started to think about perhaps being independent from Mexico. And this map of Texas counties has names in it like Houston and Jefferson and Liberty. So the conservative Mexicans, led by Santa Anna, pictured here, decided they were going to put the hammer down on those Americans that were talking about independence, including Stephen Austin. And that's the background for the Battle of the Alamo, pictured here. So there was a movement of independence in Texas by Americans that the Mexicans didn't want, and the Battle of the Alamo in San Antonio happened. Some of you have been there. But it wasn't long after that battle that Sam Houston and others defeated the Mexicans at the Battle of San Jacinto, not far from downtown Houston. So Santa Anna was forced to sign a treaty, but the Mexican government never recognized it. So the area of Texas is sort of in limbo, and the Texans declare a republic known as the Lone Star Republic. It was that way for about 10 years, but again, never really recognized by the Mexican government as an independent entity. And what really was confusing was, what's the border of this so-called independent Texas? Was it the Rio Grande, the bottom of the two rivers here, or the Nueces River, the blue line? And this was disputed between Mexico and the United States. So this is Zachary Taylor, who became president later for a year. President Polk sent Taylor down there with the army, and many people think it was to provoke the Mexicans, particularly in that disputed area between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. And that's what happened in this map, which shows a lot of the fighting of the war with Mexico. You'll notice in that southern part of Texas there were some battles. Americans were killed. Taylor ended up going into Mexico itself. And on this date, President Polk asked Congress for a declaration of war against Mexico, claiming that Americans had been killed on American soil, which wasn't quite right because the soil where it happened was disputed. And Abraham Lincoln, pictured here, who was a one-term congressman from Illinois, stood up in the Congress and asked President Polk the spot where Americans were killed on American soil, and those were known as the spot resolutions. But the war came, and the United States was successful, and here, at the end of the Civil War, when Robert E. Lee on the left is surrendering to Grant on the right, one of the things they talked about was their time as young officers in the war with Mexico.